You're listening to the Sex Addicts Recovery Podcast, a place for sex addicts to share their experiences of recovery, to help break the stigma, myths, and misconceptions of sex addiction. This podcast may contain topics of sexuality, sexual trauma, dysfunction, or other things that may be triggering, so listener discretion is advised. Hello, and welcome to the Sex Addicts Recovery Podcast. My name is Jason, I'm a sex addict, and I will be your podcast host for today. What's going on, everyone? Welcome to episode number 82 of the Sex Addicts Recovery Podcast. And yes, I am still struggling with some more congestion and coughing from a new bug. So I'm going to try to keep the intro and outro short for this episode. This week, I'm excited to be sharing a conversation that I had with a few of my close friends in program talking about the Bay Area retreat. And this is the first time since 2019 that we've had the chance to get together for an in-person retreat, which is coming up at the end of March. And since I'm on the retreat committee and in charge of spreading the word, I thought, what better way to do that than on the podcast? In years past, we would print up flyers that could be distributed at all of our Bay Area meetings where someone could talk about what the retreat is for any newcomers. But since the pandemic, some of our meetings are in person, some are on Zoom, some are hybrid, and we're not as easily able to distribute information. The retreat committee thought it would be good to talk about what the retreat is. What do we get out of a weekend of recovery? And what are some of the fears or questions that new people to the program might have? In addition to this episode of the podcast, we're also planning to do a few Q&A sessions on Zoom, and details on that to follow. One of the things that we talked about during this recording was the retreat schedule, what the weekend covers. During the recording, I read part of the 2019 schedule that we had, but I did not get to the examples of the workshops that we had for that year. As I was reading, I was starting to get coughing triggers, and so I turned it over to my guests, Tim and Paul, to continue. And so in lieu of a reading from a book this week, I thought that I would read through the whole 2019 schedule of the retreat at the beginning here before sharing our conversation. This gives the listeners or anyone new to the program an outline of what the retreat covers. So again, this was the 2019 retreat, and so times and workshops will definitely change. But yeah, on Friday, the arrival at our retreat center was between 4 and 6 o'clock, and 6 to 7 we had dinner. 7:15 to 9:15 we had an opening SAA meeting, and we'll talk about that in the recording. Some of the outer circle activities that were planned for Friday evening, we've got a DJ set up, and for people that like to get their groove on, it's an awesome outer circle thing. Not for me, but we also have a bonfire, and in the dining hall we have a chance for people to play board games, do artwork, and just gather around for general conversations. And I neglected to say it in our recording that there is also ping pong, which Paul is a real huge fan of. So yeah, we'll talk about that in the recording. On Saturday, the morning starts with meditation between 7 and 8, meditation and yoga. At 8 o'clock, there's time for breakfast. And then between 9:15 and 10:45, we have an SAA speaker meeting, and we'll go over that in the recording as well. But here's what I did not get to read in our recording, was the workshops. So between 11 and 12:30, so it's a 90-minute session. We have 5 different workshops going on. And the examples that we had from 2019 were using the 10th step, which is mining the daily 10-step inventory to strengthen character assets. We also had recovering and preserving trust, and this is a panel discussion. We'll explore trust in God, a sponsor, and the steps as our foundation for recovery, and how to rebuild trust that was lost to our addiction. Another one, a practical shortcut to the heart of the fourth step, and that definitely covered step 4. Another one on you too can meditate and learning different types of meditation. And then there was a workshop on sober dating. After that workshop session, we had a chance for lunch between 12:30 and 1:30. Yeah, it was during this lunch break here on that Saturday in 2019 where I recorded the conversation that I included in episode 1 of this podcast. And then the next workshop session was between 1:45 and 3:15. And for 2019, we had one on the third step, the beginning of a lifetime journey with a higher power. We had an awesome one on vulnerability, explore the role of vulnerability in the transformative journey from addiction to recovery as offered in steps 1, 2, and 3. And this is one that I've talked about on a previous podcast. We had a forgiveness ceremony in the tradition of the Native American Talking Circle AA meetings. This workshop focuses on forgiveness as an essential component of steps 8 and 9. There was another workshop on gratitude and acceptance. And then the last workshop in that time slot was called I've Got a Feeling. In our addiction, we avoided our feelings. Learn and take in the gift of feeling our feelings. That wraps up the afternoon session of workshops for that Saturday. Between 3:15 and 5:30 is free time where a lot of people go out and do hiking. I usually work on setting up the talent show and doing sound checks and stuff like that during that time. Some people play ping pong, lots of other types of outer circle activities that can go on there. From 5:30 to 6:30 is dinner. 6:45 to 8:15, there's another SAA speaker meeting. And then we talked about this a lot during the recording. From 8:30 to 10:30 is our talent, no talent show. And then unofficially, after that, we have an after the talent show music jam. Dining hall is also open for board games and art and conversations. And that concludes this typical Saturday. For Sunday, and again, the morning starting at 7 a.m. is meditation and yoga. Both are separate. Followed by breakfast between 8 and 9. 9 and 10, we have a chance to do cleanup and make sure that we unpack all of the things from our rooms and get them back into the cars. And then we have another session of workshops between 10:15 and 11:45. Back in 2019, the workshops that we had available were tools laid at our feet, review the simple kit of spiritual tools of SAA recovery. We also had a workshop on gratitude, and this will connect the 12 steps to the concept of gratitude and foster an attitude of gratitude. We had a spiritual practice of living in your outer circle. There was a workshop on sponsorship. And then the workshop that I led was called Everything You Wanted to Know About SAA But Were Afraid to Ask. And this was an interactive discussion about topics that usually don't get covered at our meetings, and questions including healthy sexuality, meaning health and safety, sponsorship, intimacy avoidance, and much, much more. And I actually recorded that session for learning how to edit the podcast, but it was not something that I would publish to the public. And Sunday concludes, we've got between 12 and 12:45 lunch, and then 1 to 2 p.m. the SAA closing meeting. That wraps up what a typical retreat will look like. Workshops change from year to year, but we do try to keep some workshops on the steps and other workshops on other tools of the program. So now that I've read through the outline of the retreat, I hope that gives you a foundation about what we're talking about in this recording. I'm now ready to turn it over to my conversation with Tim, Paul, and Amy. I hope you enjoy it. Here it is.
Yeah, weird to run a podcast while you're like, my normal mellifluous voice.
Yeah,
I know.
So you've got like voice altering things, right?
I do.
Oh, excellent. Then you're good.
Yeah.
You'll be fine.
I don't know. I like the semi-homeless whiskey voice. Adds a little layer of reds. Yeah. You're making authenticity real for us addicts.
Yes.
Yeah.
I don't even know what that means.
So the podcast came out of the retreat. It came out of Intergroup really, but a lot of the foundation of working on the podcast was at the retreat. And I think the last time that we met in person was 2019, and just a lot has happened over the past 4 years with the pandemic and a lot of new people in the program. And the fears around COVID and everything like that. So there's just a lot of issues going on and trying to get the message out. We used to have a network where we could print up a whole bunch of copies and distribute them to in-person meetings and say, hey, sign up for the retreat that's coming up. And now, some meetings are in person, some are still on Zoom. And as part of the retreat committee, what I've been doing is I am the outreach coordinator for that and going out to meetings. And I said, hey, I've got this podcast thing that I can convey the message through that. Of course, this reaches farther than just the Bay Area, but it's still a fun topic to cover. And so I'm really grateful that all of you joined. For anyone listening, we have recurring guest Tim joining us, and Paul MJ and Amy MJ. Welcome, everyone.
Thanks, Jason.
Yeah. Being on with Paul and Amy is like being on with a royal family of recovery. So I didn't know that you asked anybody else, but I thought it was like I heard those two names, and I'm like, I will be there to soak up what I can.
Yeah.
Are you that recalcitrant prince that we sent off to America, and this is what came of you?
Yeah, there's been a few books. It's not about that, but I'm sure for some of us you could fill books with what we've done. So.
Nice.
Yeah.
No, I remember, Jason.
I
remember one retreat. You were actually using it as an opportunity to build interest and excitement and for the podcast. So when you mentioned, this was born at the retreat, maybe not born there, but definitely it was a forum where we could get a lot of us together to talk about all sorts of great subjects.
Yeah, I remember it might have been 2017 at that point that we gathered at lunchtime on a Saturday, and I asked if anyone was interested in doing a podcast or anyone have any thoughts, and pretty soon we had like 20 people just gathered around a table and talking different ideas, and finally got the chance to get it together over the next couple of years and launched in 2021. So one of the opportunities that we have here with the podcast is trying to get out the message that, yes, we're doing an in-person retreat this year, but what exactly is the retreat? And one of the reasons that why we wanted to have Amy here, Paul mentioned this to me, and it was the same case for me and my wife. The first time that I went to the retreat, I think the Bay Area retreat started roughly in the year 2000. So I think we were kind of on track for every year that it was. It's the 19th annual. The 2020 was supposed to be the 20th annual, and so I think my first one was probably around 2005. I got into the program in 2002. The first couple of years didn't really branch out a lot beyond my one home meeting and then a few other meetings. And the first time I heard about the retreat, I was scared and not quite sure what it was all about. And once I heard from enough people that it was an amazing place for recovery, I brought the idea home to my wife and saying, hey, I would like to go for a weekend retreat. We have fondly called this at our meetings when we're in a joking manner, sex camp. And so, yeah, going away for the weekend up in the mountains with a bunch of sex addicts.
It's the T-shirts that people had problems with. where we should have cut it. We should have cut it. Private jokes. Yeah. No brand. No branding.
So, yeah, my wife was really concerned, are there going to be women present? And the meeting that is my home meeting, it's a mixed meeting. And most of the meetings where I have gone have been mixed meetings early in my recovery, but there were very few women actually at those meetings. And so she was a little bit fearful around letting me go. And Paul and Amy, I know you had similar experiences.
I can start off by, early in recovery, I felt like a lot of, the problem that I had brought needed supervision. My own decisions got me into the terrible place of sex addiction and causing all this pain in the family and with myself. And so I spent a lot of time, when I joined in 2003, basically just doing whatever Amy told me to do. And recovery, it's an interesting thing. We both wanted me to find and get recovery, but it also meant letting go. They've got that phrase in recovery, let go and let God. Before I had a God, before I had seen recovery, before I knew what 12-step was, that didn't make a hell of a lot of sense to me. And Amy can speak for herself, but when the opportunity for the retreat came up, likewise, I heard it was a place of growth and this is going to be a fantastic opportunity, but it was far away from home. It was a time where I was not going to be accountable to Amy. We didn't even have cell phone service. And there would be some women there. And I've got another comment about women in a moment, but I wanted to defer to Amy because I think it was her feelings that were evoked when I approached and said, hey, I want to hang out in the woods with some sex addicts.
Yeah. And you got to defer to me a little bit because I've got a time boundary that you all don't necessarily have. I got to jump off early. But you get a little bit of her Royal Highness.
Nice. Yes.
They do call me in COSA her Royal Highness Amy MJ of the San Jose COSAs. It is my official title. So I appreciate you bringing that in, Tim.
I was right.
And I've given up my title as, for the most part, Paul's higher power. I've tried. But yeah, at that initial retreat, I think, I was thinking about it and there was no cell phone service, right? So he's out of touch for like a whole weekend. I think there is cell phone service now in most places. I don't know, a little bit. Yeah. So having him be completely out of touch for the weekend with a bunch of sex addicts, I was like, okay, you can go to meetings with these people, but like a whole weekend with a bunch of people who, like you, are having a struggle with resisting any kind of sexual stuff. So I thought, oh man, you're going to get all of them together at one place, and it's just going to be a festival of acting out instead of a festival of recovery, right? That was my scared initial place that I was coming from. And I think the other thing was, that I was just thinking about today that I didn't even have a chance to talk to Paul about, so surprise, was that we had two very young kids. When Paul first started going to meetings, I was pregnant with our youngest. And so we had an infant, and our son is autistic. And so it was a lot of work for me to be on my own for the weekend. So I was really like, no, don't leave me for the weekend. don't because you might act out, don't because I'm scared, don't because it's going to be a lot of work for me to be left at home with these kids. And the thing that really shifted as Paul started going to retreats was to see him come back just like filled up with recovery, and to recognize like, oh, this clearly is not just a bunch of people acting out, because the energy coming out of that would be very, very different.
Yeah.
Right. I learned early on to like what it feels like when somebody's coming out of a good meeting versus coming from acting out. Like those are completely different emotional places. And part of me recognizing that, I will say as a plug here for like the COSA program, is me going to my own meetings and having that experience of being spiritually filled up and supported by people, and going to my own retreats. And like, that was, it was like, okay, you get your weekend in March, but I know I've got mine coming in October, and, and I get to go be at a cell service the weekend. Yeah.
Yeah, that reminded me in 2009, after my son was born in February, and our retreat is in March. So he was really, really little. And I asked if I can go to the retreat, and she said, you cannot go for the weekend. Luckily, the retreat center that we were in was in Santa Cruz at that time. And I lived in Los Gatos, and it was about a probably 35-minute drive for me. And so I got to go up for Saturday and just spend the day, and then come back home and be with the family. So I did not leave her with the 1-month-old at that point. But yeah, I've heard a lot from her that I don't think about these things. I think about my self-centeredness and the recovery that I get, and not thinking about, taking care of the family, taking care of all these things alone for an entire weekend. And so we just had a conversation around that a couple of days ago around this retreat, and that there are still those concerns, even though our son is much, much older.
Yeah. I'm noticing it seems a shame. I've had several Cs go through this too, where the decision to go or not go to the retreat largely hinges on their partner's attitude. There's a richness and a growth that happens at the retreat. And I think we do have to honor our relationships, our healthy, intimate relationships, right? It's not always the right or best decision to leave your partner behind for a weekend. There are times when it may be appropriate time that it's not, but it still feels, I have this sad feeling, around, not just, my partner and I are in a good place, let's see what's happening, and then I'll go or I won't go. But wow, I have messed things up so bad. She has to decide for me, or he has to decide for me if I'm allowed to go.
Yeah,
I got to say that it was.
Go ahead. No.
Oh yeah, sorry. That it was hard, like initially in recovery, because Paul would, especially early in recovery when he was feeling a lot of shame about things, defer decisions to me. And as his recovery grew, he started to hold those boundaries. I don't like that word, but for lack of a better word, right, would have his own higher power and his own decision making around things, and defer to me less. And man, I didn't like that at first. I was like, come on, man, you got to pay attention. I know better than you do, clearly, what's going on. So you should do what I say, and take care of my triggers and take care of my feelings for me. And there were times where he said, like, no, I need to go to a meeting, and went. And that was like, I really had to work through some resentments about that. But, in the end, appreciated having somebody who put recovery first, because that was ultimately the most important thing, right? Both for him, for me, and for the kids. He would not be the father that he is and show up, for friends, for family in any way without recovery.
Tim, you were about to say something?
No, I just had a similar experience. I joined in March of 2011. I want to say my daughter was 3. And it wasn't even so much that she was 3. It was I was only in this program for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Approaching me about going to the retreat. And I was in no way ready. I still wasn't, to me, sex addiction, a meeting would be like guys under a bridge with a hook for a hand. It would just, it wasn't, there would be no women. It would just be this whole shame-based thing. So there's still a lot of fear. And I think with the topic that kind of come across, it can really recall that, especially in the early days, both I don't want to anger my partner any further, so I don't want to make any wrong moves. And our daughter is really young, so I don't want to impose on her. But at the same time, there's going on a retreat. This is a huge intimacy for people who are, I think, afraid of intimacy, truly. And so it's a big ask, I think, especially for early on in the program, to be like, what am I getting myself into exactly? I've gone to a number of retreats now, so I get it, but I can also kind of identify with those who feel apprehensive about getting into it. And like, what am I getting into? What does it look like? What's going to happen to me there?
Yeah.
So Tim, when you showed up, was it a cult? Did they make you drink Kool-Aid?
Unfortunately not, because I like Kool-Aid, but it's nothing. It was nothing like so first of all, I waited a year. I didn't go that first March. I waited till the following year. So I had a lot more foundation. I had made some more friends. Actually, I think you and I really bonded at that first retreat, the first time we really talked. And it's just like, it's like it to me any other time I've had a spiritual experience at a retreat, or any time that I've gone into some place with such a high concentration of recovery. There's almost no words for like the first time that happens.
Yeah.
You get to know it afterwards, but for the first time it happens, it's quite a special thing, because I don't think I had been used to life being that generous and that open, with me before. So I had to, overcome some of my own fears to take that first step.
Mm-hmm. I wanted to swing back around, if I might, to one concern that both Amy and I had about going to the retreat, and that's that there would be potential sexual acting out partners there. Just that I act out exclusively with women. And there were, as you had mentioned, Jason, very few women who were in the rooms, but there were some. And likely at a retreat of, I don't remember, 80 people or something like that, there were going to be a few women there. Women sex addicts, women who might have boundary issues the same way I've got boundary issues. And all of this stuff is going on in my head. So I went, I'm determined to be clean, to be sober, to be in control, to not let my addiction guide my moves. And, I'm looking away from the women. I'm not talking to anyone. And I sat down with one gentleman at a table, and so many great conversations strike up. And I just mentioned, man, I'm so concerned about the 3 women who are here at this retreat with the 80 of us men. And this guy looked at me and said, I'm gay, and there are 50 other gay men here. What's your beef with like 3? Get over it. I was like, perspective, none of us are here to act out. None of us are here to be triggered or to, it's all, every single one of us are there for recovery. So it was eye-opening, and I didn't worry so much about that anymore.
Yeah, I can remember there was a time where I did get triggered by someone, and it was an opportunity for me to work my program and just to say, hey, I'm feeling a little bit edgy right now, and, pulled some people aside and just let them know. And just getting the words out just really helped it dissipate. it's just like the longer it stays in my head, the worse it becomes. So yeah, I mentioned it, and it all of a sudden is a non-issue.
Yeah. No, that happens a lot at the retreat. I feel like, the second you can speak to someone, you've got so much support from every avenue. It's just phenomenal.
That's what I would say too. There's so much acting out for me. It's like the weather. There's conditions that come together to support that. But at the retreat, there's so much support for the other way. There's so much support for authenticity and transparency, things that don't support acting out, actually. But to me, it would be a difficult place to accomplish that. But that's just the way that it feels, when you go in that place.
So I'm going to pop off.
Okay.
I've got to go do some work, but thanks for having me on here, and have a great time at the retreat. I'm so glad you guys get to experience it in person again.
Yeah.
And that you all get to fill each other up with just love and recovery. So I'm looking forward to having you guys have that experience. And, love you all. And if anybody's nervous about it, know that, what was it? It's like 19 or 18 or 20 years after Paul's first retreat. I feel really ashamed of how scared I was about that. Like, I'm embarrassed about that kind of thing. And now it just is pure love and support.
Yeah.
So enjoy. Love you all.
Yeah.
Thanks.
I'm so glad.
Good night, Your Highness.
Good to see you.
So glad you were able to join us, Amy.
Yeah. Well, she's the best, so I don't know what this is going to go downhill.
Yeah. I got nothing left.
Yeah, I was going to say, now it's just like it's going to go off the rails. But
before we move on to other things and just kind of continue on with that topic, I've been talking about this recently. We have a woman at our home group that is going to be attending for the first time, and just talking about the lodging, both when we were at Santa Cruz and now we're up in Marin County, that at the facilities we've had separate housing that is alone and safe for the women who attend the retreat. The meetings and all the workshops are mixed, and meals and outer circle activities, but when it comes to the lodging, they are completely separate.
I'm not even quite sure where the women's lodging is. Like the women, they appear like magic. It's just like, whoa, you're here. I see you're in the breakfast hall, or you're, or at the meeting. But it's, I think it's whatever they do, it seems very safe and very proper.
Yeah.
It's a great segue, I think, into, for people who don't know what the housing or lodging situation is like at the retreat. There are several tiers, as I understand it. There are the people who, like you did that first time, right? They come for the day, and then they go and they stay at home, or if they're going to come back, or at a local hotel, or, so they're just not on campus, so to speak.
Yeah.
And there's the people who come and they bring their tents. And I don't know how they do it. These people love the outdoors.
Yeah.
And they seem to have a ball. They just set up and they're outdoors. They're living in their tent. They're living their best life. Then there's the economy level of lodging, which is what I usually go for.
Yeah, me too.
Where it's like summer camp, it's like bunk beds, multiple people to a room. Maybe who's going to be in your room with you. Maybe you don't. I don't know. I just use the room to sleep after very, very long days. And I only need it for a few hours because there's so much fun going on.
Yeah.
That, I'm like, who cares where, I just need a bed and go to sleep, get up, go out. But I know a lot of people elect for some more semi-private type of housing, which is, to my knowledge, it's one bed to a room, or maybe two. I
think 2 beds per room.
2 beds per room. And I think the bathroom situations are a little, fewer people per bathroom, something like that. Yeah, honestly, just like Tim said, I don't actually know what goes on at those other lodging. I don't know what they are or what they do, but they seem to be pretty happy. And the women lodging is it semi-private tier
Yeah.
or is it
Yeah.
yeah. So it's all semi-private tier.
Yeah. And so there are multiple pricing structures. And one of the things that I love is we've had scholarship funds available for people who can't afford the full price. And for several years, I had to do that. And it was an awesome thing. I really wanted to go, but it was like pay the rent or go to the retreat. And it's like my money's got to go to the rent. And so I was really grateful that they had the scholarship fund available to allow me to go. I think right now, our scholarship, you pay basically $40. And for 2 nights, housing, 3 days of recovery, I think 5 meals, something like that, all included. And so, yeah, there are multiple ways. And, what you mentioned early on is day use, where you just come up and pay the price for the day for the workshops and the 1 or 2 meals that you attend. One of the things I was also thinking about is, I pulled up the retreat schedule. So kind of I wanted to give the listeners an idea of what the weekend looks like. Is I know, Tim, your first year, there was a lot of fears of the unknown. And so one of the things that we decided early on is that we would share the same room. And Paul, I think you were part of that same room as well.
I did. Yeah.
Yeah. And so there are, for me, I know a lot of my fears were around, I have no idea what's going to happen at this retreat. And so what I had done over the past couple of years while we were having in-person retreats is I printed up old schedules. So new people to the program would get kind of an idea of what the layout of the weekend is going to look like. And so basically on Friday, the place opens up, and I'm not sure if the time schedule is going to be the same as we did for 2019, but it'll probably follow pretty closely. The opening is at 4:00, and people show up. They register for what room they want to select, if they're doing the economy, or which lodging they want for the semi-private and stuff. Unload, make a chance to do a name tag at the art table, and just a lot of conversations going around for those first couple of hours. I'll go through kind of Friday and then, pass it on to you guys here in a sec. Then we have a dinner hour where we all get together and have a chance to eat, and some great conversation around those tables. Then we have a 2-hour meeting. And this is one that I'm really glad that we shifted the way we used to do it. Everyone at the retreat gets a chance to speak. And I remember one of the last years at Santa Cruz, there was no time limit for people sharing. And at that point, we had about 100 people, and it took a long time to get through. The last year that we were in person, I think we had 200, maybe 190 on Friday night, but Saturday was like 250. So we have a lot of people, and so we do like 30-second check-ins. Hey, this is my first time at the retreat. I'm not quite sure what to expect, or this is my 10th time at the retreat. I'm looking forward to reconnecting with old friends, looking forward to workshops and stuff. And then after everyone gets the chance to share, we have lots of different announcements for workshops coming up the next day. And then the rest of the evening is we have one area sectioned off where we've got a DJ set up for people who want to get their groove on and dance. I'm not a dancer, so I barely ever go to that. We have a bonfire, which often turns into a drum circle around the fire. And then the dining hall becomes a chance for people to connect, play board games, and do art and all sorts of stuff, and have conversations. So that's what Friday looks like.
You missed my favorite Friday night activity.
I was going to say it becomes Paul goes to ping pong camp.
Yes,
ping pong camp and half sex addiction camp.
Yeah, it's like
I'm not sure which is more important.
Let go of your sex addiction, pick up your ping pong addiction.
Yeah. Yeah, sometimes I get overwhelmed trying to make a name tag.
Yeah.
Oh, right, the crafts. Yeah.
I'm not and have never been a craft person. And after years and years and years of going to this retreat, I finally figured out the deal. Bring your name tag with you. Once you have a good one, just stick with it.
That's what I started doing too.
Yeah.
I met a few people, and maybe Jason, you're one of them, who have kept their name tags year after year after year. Yeah. And I wish I had thought of that when I started coming to retreats. It's sort of a nice little history and memento of the retreat, which doesn't get videotaped. There are no pictures taken. It's totally anonymous, right?
Yeah. I've kept a couple. I haven't kept every single one, but I do know that there are people out there that are very into their arts and crafts, and they have kept all of them.
Yeah.
We just have so much crap at our house. Paul, do you want to talk about Saturday, or do you want me to do it?
Why don't you go ahead and launch it?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think part of it, the retreat, it's kind of like my experience of it is you can be as busy as you would like to be, or as free time as you would like to be. It's a great place to make grown-up decisions. And oftentimes, so like Jason mentioned, there's a program of different workshops. I want to say that there is workshops that last about an hour or so, 90 minutes.
90 minutes.
90 minutes. Okay. And there's 2 rounds of workshops in the morning. And then there might be, there's breakfast. And if you're like me, you can actually get up at the last minute and get there within 15 minutes and still get some breakfast before you have to go be. There's a meeting, right? Or no,
yeah.
Workshops. Yes.
Yeah.
You should have gone, Paul, because I'm like,
no.
I've got the schedule in front of me, so I was just gonna.
Why are you not talking?
You're right. Yeah.
For those
we'll fill in the
birds,
color.
The early birds, not including us. Morning yoga and meditation.
There's yoga
before breakfast.
I have read that.
Honestly, I have always wanted to get up and do that, but I just can't drag it out. Instead, when you show up in the dining hall just before breakfast, there are a whole bunch of people who are quietly meditating and doing their morning routines, their 12-step morning routines and reflecting. And it's really wonderfully awe-inspiring to walk in to like the 5 people who are, separately really practicing their spirituality first thing in the morning. I'm just there for a cup of coffee, but
Right. Yeah.
We have all day coffee. That was made sure that we have all day coffee.
Yeah.
Very happy to have that in the contract. But yeah, I've noticed that there have been years. Frequently, this happens every year. There's more than one workshop I want to go to at the same time.
Oh, yeah.
There's a lot of that stuff. And there's a lot of like, I can go from workshop to workshop. But a couple of years, especially recently, I took a couple of sessions off. I've got 2 kids at home. I wanted to sleep, or the area is gorgeous. So to walk around, hike, and there is time to do that. There is built-in time.
Yeah.
But getting away happens so infrequently. For me, I've made the choice of creating more time for that. Yeah. And so everybody, that's the nice thing. You've signed up for this thing, but you're in command of the schedule, So I've gotten a lot from picking and choosing, and I've gotten a lot from just like going straight through and because there is topics for both for newcomers and for people who have been doing things wild, maybe more tricky subject like sponsorship, stuff that newcomers wouldn't be into, and really, I think you can't go whatever level you're at, you can attend any workshop and get something out of it.
Agree. Every retreat, there are workshops on each of the steps, like, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and throughout the weekend. So if you're in the midst of working a step, you've got options to go there. But then there are all these lovely other options to workshops, and some of them are, close to home, like intimacy avoidance workshops, and some of them are far out there, like music as a higher power workshops.
Yeah, all three of us were on that first one that I did.
So yeah, there are tons of options. But like you, Tim, early when I first started going, I was all about, let me get to this workshop. Let me eat up this workshop, beat up that workshop. And as years went by, I got to be a little more, picky and choosy about it. And sometimes it was, let me go on a hike with Tim. I remember, we went on a hike at the last retreat. It was nice.
Yeah, it was good. And of course, then, Saturday night, the reason everyone really shows up to the talent, no talent show.
Yeah.
So don't fool yourself. This is where the real recovery happens. But that's it's a great place where, for me, that's been a real spiritual. I've been fortunate enough to host it enough times. I get to wear gold pants. But you get to see really the artistry, I think, of people who may not consider themselves to be artists, but I do, because you really get to see them go up there, have the courage to basically do an open mic.
Yeah.
And in front of a hugely supportive crowd.
Yeah.
Having that safety net of knowing that you're not judged for putting yourself out there, I think has been a cornerstone of spiritual growth, just witnessing that. I'm always amazed to see, I project this onto other people, but for myself, there was a lot of devastation caused by my addiction.
Yeah.
And to witness people doing something free, doing something just positive and transparent, and being supported for it is healing.
Yeah, absolutely. So this show, the talent, no talent show, there were a lot of things in the first few retreats that I was just afraid of. Just didn't know, like you said, Jason, didn't know what to expect. What am I going to see? What are these people going to do? What's available here? Where is it in it for me? And I went, and it was just so infectiously wonderful. You sit in the audience and you see people go up there with talent or absolutely no talent and just show up, put their stuff out there. And like you said, Tim, get support and praise and encouragement. I couldn't stay away. I just couldn't stay away.
Yeah, just thinking of the no talent portion, one of the funniest things that I can ever remember. And I was probably one of a handful of people that really got it. A friend of mine recited the Gettysburg Address while chewing bubblegum and being pelted by wads of paper. And that was his talent, no talent. I thought it was absolutely hysterical. Everyone's just like, I don't know what the fuck is going on. But yeah, he just had the courage to make that up on the spot and get up there and do it. And it was awesome.
Now, I remember there was that one year when the dude played the typewriter. That was badass.
Oh, God, yeah.
Great. I forgot about that.
That was so great.
It's really good.
Yeah.
Yes. So it was old-fashioned typewriter, and the clicking was all percussion. set to, I forget what piece of music was behind it, but
it might have been written for the typewriter. It was just like tickety, 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 tap, ding.
Yeah, it was brilliant.
Yeah. But music, spoken word, stand-up comedy,
skits,
skits,
Shakespeare,
dance,
dance, yeah.
People really put themselves out there.
Yeah. Yeah. Saturday night for me, it's a hard night to be in bed at a reasonable time.
Yeah.
Usually it's pretty amped up. We do an after jam for musicians who want to. But just hang out. And something else I want to touch on, and I'm sure you guys have had this experience too. But two things. One, I always seem to meet at least one new person. Some connection, like with somebody who I'm like, wow, this is great. I always meet, and two, there are people that I only see at the retreat.
Yeah.
Yes.
Like they live even some people who just live in the city, but not that far from us. But they're like, like they come in and it's been a year and it's like, hey, and we pick up where we left off. And that's another, benefit of kind of coming back.
Yeah. Several of the guests that I've had on the podcast have been people that I met at the retreat. One of the guys, John, we met at probably 2006 retreat, my second retreat, I think. And I was fortunate enough to go to his wedding. And
wow,
and
that's lovely.
Huge.
We in different parts of the Bay Area get to see each other a couple times a year, but we've kept this phone relationship up, and it was an amazing thing that I got to be part of that.
It was and remains really lovely to begin to be recognized in the community. So, when I started, I went to one meeting a week. There were, 12 people at most in that meeting for a long time. And that was my recovery world, me and those, 12 or, whatever other people. And when I started to go to retreat, of course, showing up in a room with 100 sex addicts, that's wow, I'm part of a community, but I didn't know any of those people. And then I went back, at the retreat's over, I'm back to my little, 10, 12 person meeting. And then the next year I go back and someone's like, hey, I remember you. And then the next year I go back and somebody's like, hey, remember we played ping pong? Let's play ping pong again. Let's, and it's amazing the connections that I would have been able to make seeing people once a year, the deep and loving and heartfelt relationships, as well as the strong sense of being part of a much larger community. And it was, seeing these people once a year at the retreat that encouraged me ultimately to, start doing more service and going to intergroup and going to the San Francisco meeting, and I would see people that I knew from no other context except at the retreat. And they'd be like, Paul, hey, you're here. It's great to see you.
Yeah. I'm just thinking about the deep level of connection. I am a fucking night owl, and I know Tim has joined me in that, and I think Paul, you've had the common sense to get to bed a bit earlier than us, but getting to stay up. There have been a couple times at Santa Cruz. It was a bit easier when we had a campfire that we could keep going until the early morning hours. I think at our current place in Marin, it has to be out by 11. But the conversations, everyone hangs out in the dining hall, and I've been up till 1 or 2 in the morning just talking with people. And by that time, there are a lot fewer people around, and so the conversations start to get really deep, and it's just like really intense. And I've gotten to know some people really well that I do only see once a year. It's just like, wow, that level of intimacy is amazing.
Yeah.
So a couple of the other things that we neglected to bring up on Saturday is that while the talent show is going on, there's still a bunch of stuff going on in the dining hall and stuff. But the meetings we have, the morning meeting is a speaker meeting, and we usually have a speaker do an experience, strength, and hope, and then we go into breakout sessions and have a chance to get current. back in the day, it was, oh God, a nightmare when we used to have to count off. It's
Yeah.
like all the ones
One,
meet in
two.
that corner, all the twos meet in that corner. And recently they've got a grouping of chairs. So you just flip your chairs around and then you've got a circle of about 8 people that you have the small meeting in, and then it comes back to the bigger meeting. I think we have a speaker also on the in the evening meeting.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think so.
And instead of doing breakout sessions, we have people chime in with their getting current and other things. And we also have a birthday cake celebration.
Yeah.
Of course. Yeah. The birthday cake celebration is a surprise to newcomers, but always kind of fun. Everyone goes around the room and says, hey, what do you have a sobriety anniversary to announce? A month, a day, 2 months, 6 months, 5 years, whatever it is. And then, for everyone who is celebrating their sobriety anniversary, we bring out a huge cake and sing happy birthday. So it's I hope I haven't spoiled the surprise.
Pretty cool.
Turning to Sunday, and you can hear my congestion coming up again. So
no worries. Sunday morning, I don't have a lot to share about Sunday. I usually bug out kind of early.
Yeah.
But my recollection is that, again, and there's morning yoga.
Yeah.
There's breakfast, right? And people are winding down, one of the things that's so poignant on Sunday morning is that people who have attended the talent show the previous night and people who have performed, as well as people who were just in the audience, are all sort of reflecting on that joy. So there's still some of that high ride happening the morning after.
Mm-hmm.
There's a meeting after breakfast, and everything concludes just after lunch, but I don't remember if there are like workshops on.
Yeah, we usually do workshops after breakfast.
Okay.
Then we do lunch and then the closing meeting.
And then the closing meeting.
Yeah, because the 3 of us, we live a lot further away. It's like when it was in Santa Cruz, it was a much shorter drive, but Marin County, with the traffic that we have to endure, can sometimes be a few hours drive. Getting there is a lot longer because we're hitting commute traffic.
Yeah,
coming back on Sunday isn't as bad.
Yeah.
But the 3 of us, we've got kids, and we've like we were talking about at the beginning of this episode with our partners, kind of wanting to get back and be with the family.
Yeah.
And so that is an important thing, to hit the road as soon as we can and make the trek back.
One of the lovely actions that we do just prior to coming back is this reentry plan.
Yeah.
So, you spend a weekend, away at sex camp. You're filled up with all of this recovery strength and energy and excitement, and you're tired. And you have to come back to the reality that is, our everyday lives. And, as a sex addict, I've experienced the highs and lows of addiction. And even though this is a recuperating and recovering type of place, it puts me on a high. And then when I come back home, sort of regaining this normalcy is an adjustment that needs to be made. And so in order to facilitate and help everyone in sort of returning to the normal, joyous, happy, and free life, as opposed to the retreat, happy, joyous, and free life, there's been this, there's sometimes workshops, but certainly reentry plan sheets, which discuss, hey, what am I going to do when I return home? What's the next meeting I'm going to get to? When am I going to call my sponsor? On what day and what time? What other program people am I going to call? What am I going to do to take care of myself? To have thought these ideas out ahead of time and putting a plan in place so that we don't come home to a void and feel the loss as heavily.
Yeah.
It definitely is a different energy to come back from all of that support and to go back into kind of regular life. And I've even, I've become attuned to hearing the voice of addiction in my, like, I've heard my addict voice say something to the effect of, oh, it would be a great time to act, like you've had this recovery over the weekend. It would be a great time to act out because you wouldn't fall as far, right? You have all this, it's not insane, right? But it's like you've done. Look, man, you have money in the bank. Like you put by going to the street, you banked a bunch. So, that's the type of twisted logic, though. Just act out, and you'll have, you can fall back on. Thankfully that hasn't been the case, but I'm just illustrating your point, Paul, about how important it is to have support because, I never know what turn the crazy is going to take. and so for me, it's actually an exercise in humility too. It's like, okay, I know that getting support would just kind of keep it going. And there was also, I remember too, wanting to get to the Monday meeting after this because I wanted some of that high back.
Yeah.
And the only place I could get, the closest I could get was to get back to like the Monday meeting.
Get back to recovery. Yeah.
It was real.
Yeah. Big time outer circle stuff. So one of the things that we've done is usually my wife has a nice meal planned and then maybe a movie that we can watch or a TV show or something that is kind of family oriented and kind of brings us together and allows some decompression.
One of the gifts I'm giving myself this year, like you mentioned, the retreat is far enough away that it's pretty draining to drive back, and it's basically drive back, go to sleep, and then get up the next day and go to work. And so one of the gifts I'm giving myself is I've asked for Monday off of work.
Nice.
I'm planning to take off Friday so I can leisurely go, and then Monday as a period where I can recover without having to just jump back into the
wow.
Yeah, I did the same.
That's pretty huge.
Yeah.
Tim and I have carpooled for a number of years, and just the awesome time spent in the car, and Paul with you going to intergroup. It's just that's like another meeting unto itself. Whether we're talking about music and metal or whatever, and then eventually the conversations start to get into relationship issues and program stuff, and it's a bonding experience.
Oh, for sure. That's some of my favorite times. I forget where we hit the Starbucks, but it's like it becomes part of the ritual. And I think that's important, right? Because acting out and addiction is a ritual too. A bunch of things happen around that. So, part of doing this retreat and doing things like this level of self-care is as addicts, we're creating new rituals that are supportive.
Yeah.
So supporting the type of people that we want to be, supporting the type of people that we don't want to have regret. We don't want to have shame and all of that stuff. Right. And this is, I think, important to, if anybody's on the fence about attending this thing, I would, hopefully urge them to take a leap of faith and give it a shot, because it's just so positive to support those new habits.
Yeah. I wanted to touch on, we sort of spoke about this earlier, sort of the building relationships, meeting people, finding close contacts at the retreat. It was at the retreat that I actually found my sponsor, who's been my sponsor for the past, 15 years, something like that. So it was funny because I went to the retreat. I'm introverted, am certainly afraid of people, and did not know what to expect at the retreat. A lot of time trying not to spend time with other people at that very first couple of retreats, not knowing what to expect. So I planned, probably not wisely, a hike for myself when we were in Santa Cruz. And I say probably not wisely for several reasons, but one is because mountain lions have been spotted in there and you shouldn't be by yourself, blah, 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 blah. Anyway, despite my best efforts, you can't like wander around the hills without running into like some sex addicts or something like that. And I was hiking on my own, and I heard some talking, and the talking caught my ear because it was a group of people. They were walking on some hike, part of our group, and they were talking about fantasy novels. Like I'm almost positive they were talking about Harry Potter, which always like perks my ear up. I'm like, Harry Potter? Who's talking about Harry Potter? What's going on here? And I listened in. I ended up joining the group. I'm just walking along with them because we're I was like, what's going on here? And I felt and heard the conversation turn from, the lighthearted decisions of Hermione Granger to, the depths of addiction and how it's affected their lives and their partners' lives, and the intelligence and clarity with which they spoke and the wisdom. I just at that moment said, one of these people has to be my sponsor. That's it. One of them has to be my sponsor, because I can feel the spiritual connection, the intellectual connection, the program, the recovery connection. And these people were happy, joyous, and free, clearly. And I was still miserable. So, it took some doing, but, I fooled one of them into being my sponsor, and I am so grateful. It was a wonderful happenstance that, I don't think could have happened in a place that wasn't the retreat. Not for me, not in this way. It was very organic and free.
Yeah, my sponsor he wasn't my sponsor at the time, but I went to his workshop, and of course, I projected, this guy's never like, it would be my dream if he sponsored me, but I am not worthy. Like, there's no way. I called him, not right away. Took time to beat myself up about it first, but a couple of months or something like that. But that was the origin. That's where I first, connected to this guy, and it's been amazing. Like,
Yeah. I remember I didn't find my second sponsor at the retreat, but getting to do step 2 at the retreat, and then start to talk about step 3. And we completed step 3 at our home meeting, but just the getting that time to connect with my sponsor at the retreat and do step work has been amazing.
Yeah. That's actually something that I don't know that we mentioned earlier, that's happened for me, for you, clearly, that the retreat is an opportunity for me to meet one-on-one with my sponsor, who is long distance relatively. I don't, I guess some people see their sponsors daily. I see my sponsor, monthly, yearly, every
like
few
Yoda.
years.
Yoda.
Yeah.
When Paul goes back to Dagobah.
I have to go back to Dagobah. But the retreat is special because I know he's going to be there. I'm going to be there. And we can, actually get some great personal and in-depth step work and study done. And it's just great opportunity.
Yeah.
Well, guys, we've been talking here for about an hour. So I'm really grateful for you guys showing up. And one of the things that I'll hopefully be able to put into the end of this episode when I get ready to publish it is that on the 18th, Paul, I think is when we're talking about doing it.
Yep, 18th.
We're going to be doing a couple of Q&A sessions on Zoom for people in the Bay Area thinking about wanting to go to the retreat. And some of the stuff that we talked about covering is what we covered here in this episode. But we wanted to have a chance for people to have other questions or have an interaction with the retreat committee. And so we're going to be doing at least 2 sessions, and I'm not sure if we're doing any more on Saturday the 18th. And I'm trying to get this out as soon as possible so we have time to get the links out and the retreat is going to be at the end of March, the beginning of April, that last weekend there. And so as an outreach thing, we wanted to talk about it here on the podcast and let other people know that we're going to have a couple of Zoom sessions. And I don't have the details for them yet, but hopefully I can put that at the end of this podcast post-production. So anyway, I'm really grateful for you guys showing up and Amy here at the beginning of the episode.
Thank you for the invitation. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah. Thanks, guys.
Thanks. Take care.
Thanks, guys. Bye, guys. Bye. I'm so glad that the three of us finally had the chance to record an episode together. And I am also grateful that Amy was able to join us and share her perspective. This conversation really has me excited about the retreat, and as I mentioned at the beginning of the episode, I recorded the workshop that I led in 2019 to help me learn how to edit the podcast and figure out music and artwork that I can bring to Intergroup and show them the plans for what I had in mind for the podcast. We had about 40 people at that workshop, and I did not get permission to use their voices. Since I was introducing the workshop with my voice only, I thought I would share an early edit of the workshop podcast, non-existent episode. Hello, and welcome to the Sex Addicts Recovery Podcast. My name is Jason, I'm a sex addict, and I will be your host for today's podcast. Well, thank you for joining me, and today I'm happy to share a workshop that I recorded at the San Francisco Bay Area Retreat, which happens every March. And the topic of this workshop is called Everything You Wanted to Know About SAA But Were Afraid to Ask. So I'm glad you're here and enjoy this workshop. Hi, my name is Jason and I'm a sex addict.
Hi, Jason.
Welcome to my workshop on everything you always wanted to know about SAA but were afraid to ask. One of the things you may be asking, what the hell is this thing? So Intergroup has bought a digital recorder. I'm working on a podcast for the group. This will not be used for the podcast. This is for me experimenting with the microphone and how to do post-production. So don't worry about this information going out to the public. It's going to stay within this room and within my room at home. So this workshop is basically, an idea of conversation. So the podcast that I'm looking at doing is having one-on-one interviews with people where we talk about experience, strength, and hope. But in other weeks, having a group of people getting together and talking about topics. And some of the things that... Yeah, it's interesting to hear the intro that I had for the first version of the podcast, and that became the outro bumper music for the conversations. And Tim, who is on this episode, was the one that put the music together for that. With that, I'm looking forward to the workshops for this year, and I might be working on a music workshop with a program friend, or I might submit a proposal for a workshop on the podcast. We'll have to wait and see. I mentioned that we'll be having a few Q&A Zoom sessions on February 18th to cover all sorts of questions for people new to the program or who have not attended the retreat before. We didn't cover this in our conversation, but the cost of food has gone up considerably, and consequently the cost of the retreat has risen. And we hope that anyone who's able to make a donation to help bridge the gap, that we can offer scholarship to every member who wants to attend the retreat. And all donations to the retreat committee are tax deductible. And we'll be able to address those questions and more at the Q&A session. Since I don't have the details at this time of the recording, you can email me at jason@sexaddictsrecoverypod.com, and I will be happy to give you that information. I did receive a few emails this week, but I'll hold those for another episode when my voice can handle it. And if you did wish to provide feedback for the podcast, you can reach us at feedback@sexaddictsrecoverypod.com. I'll be including the link to the Bay Area website that has our announcement around the retreat, which also contains links to registration and a link for workshop proposals. And we are looking for workshop proposals to be entered by March 15th. So with that, I'll wrap up for this week. I'm grateful for you tuning in. And as always, keep coming back. The views and opinions contained in the Sex Addicts Recovery Podcast are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect those of the Bay Area Intergroup or the ISO of SAA.